Welcome to GCSE Biology Paper 1, Bioenergetics Respiration, Lesson 3. As always, some top tips to make sure you're focused through this lesson, and a reminder of the run-through of the lesson. Can you make sure you've got all you need for today's lesson? So if you haven't, if you need to get some of the resources, please pause and organise. Let's get started with retrieval practice. So here is the biology retrieval. So can you pause and retrieve? Here are the answers to the retrieval. So can you pause and revise? The chemistry retrieval, pause and retrieve. The answers to the chemical retrieval, pause and revise. The physics retrieval, pause and retrieve. The answers to the physics retrieval, please pause and revise. Here are the answers to the practice from yesterday's lesson. So can you please pause and check your answers? Here are the next 4 questions. Please pause and check. Finally, here is question 9 from yesterday. Please pause and check. Now let's get on to some teacher instruction. Here are the resources that you need for today as far as new knowledge is concerned. If you need to print it out, pause and organise. The new knowledge for today's lesson is related to anaerobic respiration in yeast cells. And the first thing we need to know is, what is fermentation? Now, fermentation is basically the name given to anaerobic respiration in yeast cells. So let's write that down. Fermentation is the name given to anaerobic respiration in yeast cells. Okay. And if you remember from our previous lesson that the word equation for anaerobic respiration in yeast cells is glucose is broken down into ethanol and carbon dioxide. And of course, during this reaction, energy is transferred. And if you remember from our last lesson that less energy is transferred by anaerobic respiration than aerobic respiration. Okay, so that is fermentation. It's basically anaerobic respiration in yeast cells, and the products of that breakdown of glucose are ethanol and carbon dioxide. The other thing you need to know about fermentation are its uses. And the first one is to produce alcoholic drinks. So, number 1, to produce alcoholic drinks. And it's the ethanol that provides the alcohol. So think of ol and ol. So it's the ethanol that makes drinks alcoholic. In this process, the yeast cells start to reproduce rapidly. And as they're doing that, they basically use up the oxygen, so they can then only respire anaerobically. And then fermentation takes place producing this ethanol and carbon dioxide, but it's the ethanol that makes the drinks alcoholic. And examples of alcoholic drinks, we've got beer and wine. Okay. So that's the first use of fermentation. The second use of fermentation is in baking, and it's to produce bread. To produce bread. Okay. Now, in this process, the yeast respires using the sugar added to the dough. As it respires, bubbles of carbon dioxide make the dough rise. Okay, so it's the carbon dioxide that is important in the production of bread. So we can say the carbon dioxide makes the dough rise. Okay. You might ask, why is bread not alcoholic? And that's because as the bread is being baked in the oven, the alcohol that's produced evaporates. Okay, so let's make a note of that. So the alcohol produced evaporates as the bread is baked. If you remember from yesterday's lesson, we also said that some plants also respire anaerobically. So I just want to make a note of that here. So let's just say anaerobic respiration in plants. So anaerobic respiration in plants. So let's just write certain plants and plant cells also respire anaerobically. These include plants that grow in marshes, plants that grow in marshes where oxygen concentration or oxygen concentrations will be low. And the reason why the oxygen concentrations are low is because marshes are waterlogged. So that is the new knowledge for today. What I would like you to do now is just embed this new knowledge. So can you pause and embed? Now that you've embedded that new knowledge, we will do some practice. So here are today's SLOP questions. Questions 1 to 4, question 5, question 6, and question 7. Can you now pause and SLOP? Answers will be discussed in the next lesson. Until then, can you do some retrieval practice? Retrieval tests will be at the end of the week. complete the slop and make people aware of the video. See you soon.